What's up, y'all? It's Mr. Ernest Krem III, your favorite Black history teacher, coming right back at you with your Black history fact of the day. By now, most of you all have already seen the Madam C.J. Walker story called Self-Made on Netflix. I thought it was pretty good. I enjoyed myself for the most part, but I'm a history teacher by trade, so I'm overly critical of these things. And I gotta tell you, there were a bunch of lies. So many lies, I could probably do an hour-long video, but for the sake of time, I'm gonna keep it short. And this is my fourth Black history fact of the day, so I'm going to give you my top 4 lies in the Madam C.J. Walker story on Netflix called Self-Made. Let's get into it. Number 4, Booker T. Washington and Madam C.J. Walker never got into it like they showed in the docuseries. Booker T. Washington was, in fact, the most prominent African-American leader at that point in time in history. Madam C.J. Walker did attend the event and did want to speak. She did jump up and speak, but Booker T. Washington moved on to the next person. He never pulled her to the side and went in on her like they showed in the docuseries. Matter of fact, they had a relationship prior to that event, and after that event, their relationship flourished and it became even stronger. And although he was initially leery of promoting cosmetic fields because he thought that they were promoting Eurocentric beauty standards, he bought into Madam C.J. Walker, and they formed an even stronger partnership, and they worked together several times. A lot of times, actually. The docuseries didn't show that, though. Number 3, there were a bunch of made-up scenes, y'all. Like, for instance, the scene when she consulted with John D Rockefeller, the wealthiest American of all time, and sought out business advice. That never actually happened. Although it would seem like that was a great idea. I mean, he was and is still the wealthiest American ever. And she did live 3 miles apart from this dude. It didn't happen though. She didn't need to actually consult with him for any advice. She had her own circle. She had her own business acumen. So that was completely made up. Ask yourself why. Another scene that was made up was when her ex-husband, played by Blair Underwood, came to her factory while she was about to seal a business deal. He was drunk, off his square, ruined the deal completely. That never actually happened either. Again, ask yourself why. Another scene that was made up when she sought out investment funds from a local Black entrepreneur who owned a funeral home. He attempted to rape her. That never happened either. Again, ask yourself, why would they make that up? Number 2, you know Tiffany Haddish, who played Madam C.J. Walker's daughter throughout this docuseries. They made it seem as if she was what? As if she was gay, like she was married, but she couldn't stand her husband because she was yearning to get with this woman. That never actually happened. There's no proof whatsoever that Madam C.J. Walker's daughter, who was a titan in her own sense, who was a go-getter in her own sense, there's no proof that she was a lesbian. They even alluded to the fact that she adopted because of that. She did adopt, but it wasn't because of that. There's no proof of that. She actually had a few marriages, but it had nothing to do with her being a lesbian. They made that up. They lied about that. Ask yourself, why? Number 1, the number 1 lie in this docuseries, y'all, if you haven't figured it out by now, is the purported relationship between Madam C.J. Walker and her mentor, Addie Monroe. That was completely made up. A lot of you all already know Addie Monroe was based on the real life person, Annie Malone. But we have to understand, when we're watching stuff like this, pay close attention to how they advertise it. When they say based on a true story or based on the life or inspired by, that means they're going to create their own version of these events and their own version of this story. Annie Malone, who that was based on, was a very successful businesswoman in the hair care industry. She is the person that Madam C.J. Walker worked for first. They lied and made it seem like she didn't want her to work with her, but she did. And she did branch off and do her own thing, but there was no type of animosity between these two. It was not a tumultuous relationship. The only competition that existed was the fact that they were the top 2 leading people in this field. That was it. Annie Malone was not a colorist. She did not despise Madam C.J. Walker because she was light. That was completely made up. There was no type of animosity to the point where they would want to fight each other, physically assault each other, like it was alluded to in this docuseries. Annie Malone was not the product of a slavery rape, as they alluded to. All of this stuff was made up. And in case you didn't know, it's possible that Annie Malone is actually the first self-made black woman millionaire in this country. But where Madam C.J. Walker has her beat is the fact that Annie Malone was not great at record keeping. And because she lived a lot longer than Madam C.J. Walker, we saw her legacy reach a peak. We also saw her legacy fall. Madam C.J. Walker died at the height of her success. And she was a meticulous record keeper. We know most of her success because she documented everything. She did all of her taxes. You were able to see all her stats. Whereas Annie Malone, we can't say the same thing about her. So these are two great black women, two great Americans, two great entrepreneurs that we should definitely celebrate. But I really despise and dislike how this docu-series tried to show their relationship as if they hated each other, as if black women can't work together, as if there was a colorism issue going on. Now, colorism does exist, and it did exist back then, but it wasn't something that existed between the relationship of these two admirable black women who we should all be celebrating, not viewing as two people. Now, consider all that information about Madam C.J. Walker and Annie Malone. I need you to answer this question for me. You already know what it is. What action will you take to make history today? And I'm out, y'all. Peace.